That would be pretty crazy. And I was joking with Angela, like, I might be related to your best friend. I'm kidding. But I don't know. I have an older brother. He's got kind of a reddish beard, too. My mom's kind of got reddish hair, so who knows? Who knows? But it was an interesting, message a month ago. Anyway, let's kind of fill everybody in on what we talked about last week. So, who remembers? For class, what did fun topic? Hate, yeah. Such a fun topic. And what is like the general overview, main point that really Jesus tells us, at least as far as how we are to hate or not hate? Yeah, right. Exactly. So basically, he teaches that you don't hate anybody. All right. You love your neighbor and your enemies, but there is a proper place for hate. And what is that proper place? Yeah, sin, evil. That's kind of the general main teaching about hate. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of, before we go into the next thing, we're going to talk about anger, but just some clarification. There were some good questions. Sometimes there's questions that come up and like, well, I don't really have an answer for that right now. So just to provide some clarification that might, it's confusing because Paul he brought up a good question and I want to provide some clarification. When we think about the word hate, sometimes when you read through scripture, you might be a little bit confused because you read hate in one passage and like, okay, yeah, I understand that it's talking about like this petty kind of human hate. And then you read hate in another passage, you're like, wait a minute, it can't be talking about the same thing. Because what's a good example of hate being used, but it's definitely not petty human kind of hate? What does Jesus say?
Shedding of innocent blood for time.
Yeah. Yes, but what I'm asking is, what's a time that Jesus uses that word, but it's not in the same sense of hating evil? You cannot follow me unless you hate your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, right? Same word. Like that's this same Greek word that's used and applied to evil, that's used and applied to sin, right? Same Greek word, but obviously we know that Jesus is not saying that, okay, we wish ill upon our mother. We wish ill upon our father. He's not saying that, right? And so this is just a simple illustration that sometimes Greek words, they same Greek word, but means pretty different things, right? And so in the case of, that's in Luke chapter 14, verses 25 and 26. It's the same word used in Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. All right, you've heard it said that you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Same word. Obviously, Jesus is not saying you hate your father and mother, but rather sometimes that word is used in the sense of to love less or to esteem less than you would esteem Jesus, right? To love your father and mother less than you love Jesus. He's not saying that you literally hate your father and mother, but you don't love them more than you love me. That's what Jesus is getting at. So just, again, provide some clarification because sometimes you have Greek words where it's the same thing, but it means different things depending on the context that it's used in. So, and then Paul brought up a good question. What about Proverbs, which is a very good question. Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs 6, verses 16 through 19. Obviously, this would not be in Greek. The original language would be Hebrew, but carries similar meanings. So, verses 16 through 19, it says, "There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil." So far it's not talking about people, but things people do. Right? But then Paul pointed out, it's a good point, verse 18 and 19, or rather, no, verse 19. A false witness who breathes out lies. That's a person. Right? And so again, good point. And one who sows discord among brothers. So, again, one passage that it might be confusing is, okay, we're taught that we're to love our neighbors and our enemies, but back in Proverbs, it kind of seems like God himself hates certain kinds of people. Right, so what's going on? Or you might even think of Romans. Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. Right? Another instance where you get this, it's confusing because we're taught to love our neighbors and our enemies, but apparently God hates certain people. So what's going on here? Why can God hate certain people, but we can't? Now, yeah. So that's kind of what we get at. First, I think we should understand that God, when Scripture describes God's hatred, it's not the same thing as sinful hatred of mankind, if that makes sense. Where it's petty, we wish terrible things on other people, not the same thing as the hatred that we know that we commit. Second, the word for hate, as I said, sometimes there's nuance with these words. It doesn't always mean the exact same thing. It can mean to detest or simply to view someone as an enemy. All right, and so Proverbs, it could just be saying that God, he views these people, false witnesses, he views people who sow discord, he views them as enemies. Not that he's, you think about the other text, what is it? He does not delight in the destruction of the wicked, right? And so God is not hating people in the same sense as, again, petty, humid hatred. Finally, again, one of these instances where biblical Hebrew and Greek, it has nuance, all right? It has nuance, just like sometimes English words have nuance. When we use the word love, we don't always mean the same thing, right? When I say I love Cheetos, it's not the same thing as I love my wife, right? Again, it's pretty clear that even in English, in the English language, our words, though they be the same, carry nuance depending on the context that they're used in. Second, sometimes we impose, again, our human thinking on a word on God. Where sometimes we apply what we think of anger, we apply that to God. We think God, some people might wrongly think, okay, God's like us and we lose control, we lose our temper and he just flies off the handle. But that's not how God is angry, like we do sometimes. God does not hate, right, as we do. God does not love as we do. Sometimes our love is very superficial, right? And so point being is we got to be careful and not impose our human understanding of certain words upon God. And so I think, again, let me be, I'm trying to be cautious because, look, I had to think about this for a little bit. Paul brought up a good question. So I don't want you to think that, okay, here's the answer, all right? Does that make sense? I'm not saying that this is the way. I'm not saying that I'm completely right. But I think that we make a mistake in applying our human understanding of words upon God. Does that make sense? And so I think that this would be the case with the word hate. Right? We're not to understand God hating as people hate. Anyway, another question that was brought up, Bill brought up a good question. We brought up the topic of war. Because often, that's pretty obvious that sometimes it's pretty clear that in war, hate's kind of a prerequisite in a lot of cases for people to participate in war. Now, to address that, what about war? How does that relate to hate? How do we reconcile we are to love our neighbor and our enemies, but at the same time, man, sometimes it seems there's got to be times where, evil stood up to, right? Now, first of all, I will point out that Jesus never directly addresses war. Not once. Now, he certainly talks about topics that could be related, but he never says, all right, therefore there's never a time when someone could participate in war, right? Jesus never directly addresses the topic of war in the sense that we think of it, but he does address our heart, our desires, our motivation. And so in war, I think a good question, think about what is the motive? Or what is the motive? Would that not be important? Because again, I think it's pretty obvious, and we all know this, there are certainly times in history where it's been absolutely necessary that people stood up to evil that was running rampant, right? and sometimes standing up to evil that's running rampant looks like force. So what's the motive? Are we standing up for justice and mercy, or are we standing up out of a selfish need for revenge? Right, and I think that would be maybe a more important question than, is it appropriate for Christians to participate? Rather, the better question would be, what's our motive? Is it driven by hate and a need for revenge? These people wronged me, therefore we gotta get them back? Or is it genuinely a concern for justice and mercy? And I would say that, for the most, obviously not for the most part, but definitely that was the case for World War II. I've used the obvious example where that was absolutely a case that we can all probably agree on, that we were driven by justice and mercy, right? Because evil was running rampant, something needed to be done. Now, again, as I pointed out last time, even at Harding way back when, there were people who completely refused to participate in war, like citing passages like Matthew 26, where Jesus tells Peter to put your sword down, right? Those who live by the sword die by the sword. Also in Matthew chapter 5, verse 39, of course, turn the other cheek, right? If somebody slaps you, turn the other cheek. So some people cite those to say, no, we just across the board should not participate in war. Now, I would point out that those kind of seem more geared towards personal responsibility. As far as when people wrong you, what is your response? I don't think those passages necessarily address when evil runs rampant, when it's institutionalized and a group of people is being killed, slaughtered, right? So again, Jesus, he never really teaches on how do we respond in situations like that. He teaches on personal responsibility as far as how we personally respond when people wrong us. Some other passages you can consider, because it is kind of I don't know, admittedly it's kind of tricky. It's not exactly a yes or no, if that makes sense. It's not exactly a yes, we participate in war all the time. It's not exactly a no, we never participate in war. Like it's not that simple. Does that make sense? I think we could agree. Like when it comes to war, our participation in it, it's not as simple as a yes or no. I think we could agree on that. This is a very difficult topic. But Ephesians, let's, again, just kind of illustrating, there is, it's not contradiction, but it's, again, I like to use the word nuance. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. As we know, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. That's true. Right? That's true. But sometimes, a lot of times, these spiritual forces work through physical forces. I think that's pretty clear. Like that spiritual reality has an effect on physical reality. And so sometimes the response to the spiritual reality is also a response to the physical reality, because that's sometimes how it works. Were you? Yeah. Right. And so there's a lot of ways in which that could be applied. What does that mean? And what situations are we talking about? As far as like if your country, and I think maybe it would apply in this sense, if your country is standing up to blatant evil, then yeah, I think maybe following that would be appropriate, standing up to the evil with it. But then you also have an instance, again, nuance. What is, oh goodness, is it Paul, or I sometimes mix up things, Paul or Peter, who, I think it was Paul in prison, maybe not. We shall obey God rather than men. Where is that? Y'all know what I'm saying? Paul, you know what I'm talking about? Acts 4. Okay. Yes. That's an example of, it's not a contradiction, but nuance. Because when it says obey the governing authorities, it's not saying in literally everything, That's not what he's saying. Because sometimes governing authorities might try to command you or force you to do things that go against God's will. So, again, nuance, not contradiction, nuance. Psalm 82. Psalm 82, verse 4. Maybe back up a little bit. Let's just start verse 1 through 4. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Give justice to the weak and to the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. Right? So again, another passage, not contradiction, nuance. Sometimes we do stand up for the needy because there's wicked people that are doing very terrible things to a lot of people. Yeah, Paul.
I was thinking about the handful of songs written by David where basically he called upon God to kill his enemies.
Yeah.
And I've always thought about, that's a little bit, that's significantly different than what, and I haven't always been able to reconcile it in my mind.
No, I hear you. I think we'd agree that everything that God decreed was good and leading up to an ultimate purpose.
Yeah.
And so for that's like I would say that in part that's a foreshadowing of what God desires as far as cleansing the earth of sin, evil. And then ultimately Jesus is the fulfillment of that. And so it's not that it's not I know that you agree with this. It's not that Jesus is different. It's just that God more fully accomplishes that through Jesus. Whereas the Israelites going into the land of Canaan, that's just such a small picture of what God was planning to do, and I think we would agree with that. God's ultimate plan to purify everyone, his people who are in him.
Well, I think sometimes trying to understand all of God's purpose in the context of Romans 13:1.
Mm-hmm.
I always struggle a bit with reconciling that verse with the American Revolutionary War. I think that God had a hand in the deliverance
Yeah.
of our country from tyrannical overshadowing.
Yeah.
But, we were definitely not in subjection to the government.
Well, I mean, I guess one could argue how much of a governing authority really was it, because they weren't even there. As they argued, you're not even here. You have no representation.
When you look at the documents, everything, the set the framework
Yeah.
for the governance of this country, I think it's clear that God had.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, that is true. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out where I was going to go. Before we move on to anger, any other questions and comments? Again, like this is the going over this, just a quick overview of kind of the other questions we had last week. I'm not giving you like, here's the answer. These are my thoughts and what I've read. So I just want to be honest as far as where I'm at. Like I don't know that I have like I know that I don't have an answer that's like 100% completely satisfactory. Like I'm not full of myself, okay? Trust me. And I'll be like, I think I've been pretty honest with you all. Like sometimes when I'm teaching, I want to be fair. So anyway, this being said, let's move on to anger. How often would you say you feel angry? Every time the Cowboys play? every time the Cowboys play. when last Sunday evening when you saw the for some reason they had a tight end lined up to block Micah Parsons, and the tight end, he could have just held him and took a penalty so they could have another chance to throw it in the end zone. But no. He had to let Micah Parsons sack Dak Prescott, and they could have won. But it ended in a tie. So, maybe you're angry about something like that. Okay. Anyway, what usually angers you? This is not rhetorical. What usually angers you and why? Injustice. Yes. Yeah, and that should anger people for sure. Yeah. And I would ask why, but it seems pretty obvious. Because when we talk about injustice, we think of people hurting or people hurting others. So of course that should anger us.
One thing that bugs me and hypocrisy.
Yeah.
You see people in the government saying certain things, acting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Define anger, because use that word a little bit flippantly, like,
No, yeah.
the other day I was angry at like something I was making on the stove because it wasn't working correctly.
Right.
But, like, I'm not actually angry at it.
No, I hear what you say. Yes. Nuance, as we've talked about. We'll go, let's see. We'll go there in a second. We'll go to Matthew. So we'll go there in a second. But I guess just for now, just talking like as we generally think about it, in our sense. Do people anger you?
There's a lot of things there that anger me that shouldn't.
Yeah.
And I sometimes get embarrassed that got me. Traffic, people,
Yeah.
inanimate objects or things like that. I'm like, really? I feel like I should have.
Refs.
I shouldn't let those get me, but they do.
Yeah. No, I understand. French doors.
French
As I was at, do people anger you? I don't think. Yeah, we've all been angry with people. So let's go to, actually, hang on a second. I just want to clarify before we continue. This is not a lesson on why you shouldn't be angry, right? Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, it says, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger." Be angry and do not sin. So, right, it's not that there's never, again, a place or time where we can be angry, but what do we do? Yes?
We have our emotions, and we bring those emotions by God.
Mhm.
But like the verse says, what do we do with that?
Yeah.
Those emotions.
Yes,
We can have all of those feelings.
that's true. That's good. And that's, part of the point, like why I wanted to do some classes on emotion is because, like, emotions aren't bad. Like, does that make sense? Emotions are not bad. They're given to you by God. It's just, what do you do in your emotions, right? How do you respond? How do you think? All right? How you think, how you respond, what do you do? Like, that could be sinful, but emotions are not sinful. Does that make sense? Sometimes they're treated as sinful, but they're not. Okay. Let's see. Matthew chapter 5. And so in Matthew 5, it's pretty much what you would think as far as anger, like to be provoked, to be indignant, enraged. Like that's what Matthew 5 is. But probably, it might be, I need to maybe do a little more word study on that. But as far as I can recall, it might be stronger, though. It's not just like, as you said, there are different levels to this, and you pointed out a good point. It's not like, oh, I dropped something and I got a little frustrated. This is maybe a little stronger, where it's more like rage. Yeah, and that's yes, and it's kind of interesting that sometimes the line between anger and hate is not that far. It's not a big gap. Anyway, let's read this. Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 and 22. You've heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry, again, like rage, enraged with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. So, what kind of anger is being talked about? It's not just this, and what Jesus is talking about here, and to David's point, at this point, it's not just a feeling, as verse 22 kind of makes clear. Like, it's not that you feel frustrated, but you go to something else. Yeah. Yeah, there's this enmity you have towards another person. The anger that gets to the point where you think less of your brother. Yeah, exactly. When you, like, it's contempt. So sometimes, this word, let me find it real quick. I'm not using Google, this is Accordance. It's a Bible software. The same words used in Ephesians chapter 4. Be angry, do not sin. Jesus says, but I say to you, everyone who's angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Again, not a contradiction, nuance, because the angry, like, Jesus is talking about an anger that goes to contempt, I think less of you. You fool. Right? There's a different, yeah, Lexi. Right. Yeah. Right. No, that's good. It'd be like insults. And so out of anger, do you insult? Do you call them names? Right? That would be where you cross the line into sinfulness. Yeah.
So it's a quote from David, Psalm 4. It says, tremble and do not sin, or anger and do not sin. Meditate in your heart upon your bed, be still. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and trust in the Lord. It's an idea that you can be angry, but we're still coming back to, okay, we're letting God take care of this.
Yeah.
It's not this tearing down,
Right.
or the meaning of someone. It's, man, you got me riled.
Yeah. Yeah.
God, it's
Right.
the action is okay. Take a breath, be still,
Right.
meditate.
Yes, no, that's good. Again, nothing wrong with anger itself. There's nothing wrong with anger itself. I think we can see that. That's pretty clear. Yeah, Irene. How you respond in anger. Again, I would point out, based on what we're reading, how you respond or what you do or what you say in anger causes strife. Anger itself, because you can be completely on it. Like, look, I'm kind of frustrated. I'm kind of angry. Like, and people who are married, we know this. Like, sometimes you get angry with your spouse, but you can go to them and say, hey, I'm a little bit frustrated because of this or because of what's going on. But it's not that it's causing strife, right? Like, just being angry doesn't cause strife. What someone says. Yeah, it could lead to that if someone sins in their anger. Yeah. Let's continue reading verses 23 and 20. Back in Matthew chapter 5, verses 23 through 26. So, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you'll never get out until you have paid the last penny. So, thinking about this, obviously, in connection to anger, what does this tell us?
It's talking about when we have knowledge of somebody being angry with us.
Right. And isn't that's hard? Like, the responsibility is put on the party that knows someone else is angry with them. Because sometimes, being honest, sometimes when you know someone's angry with you, it's hard to want to go to that person. Sometimes I don't want to, right?
Well, I think it depends on the person.
Yeah,
You know, if I know that my wife is angry,
yeah,
I need to reconcile that.
right,
If it's a total stranger or somebody who just, like, whatever.
right. But, at the same rate, obviously this is not a one-way street. Because you could go to someone, try to have reconciliation, but that person not let go of it. And at that point, it's just like, okay, But regardless, what should we do? We should seek reconciliation, which is a mending, a settling of disputes, right? A mending of relationships. Reconciliation. Now, do we have time for this? Yeah, we can have time. A little bit. That's all right. We can go a little bit longer. I have a video that's very, very straight to the point as far as how do we handle anger? How do we handle our anger? So I'm going to let Angelo pull that up, if it's able to be pulled up. If not, I can just talk about it. Okay, cool.
I'm not a big fan of formulaic Christianity, 3 simple steps to your best life now, but there are 3 steps that Jesus' brother James gave us in the book of James on how do we handle our anger. Here's what he says. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone, say everyone with me, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Real quick, let's break that down. Quick to listen. Are you quick to listen when you get upset? I know I'm not. I'm a parent. I've got 3 kids in the home, and there are often times that I see them do something, their behavior doesn't line up with what I know we're teaching them, what I know we're trying to instill in them. And so the first thing that I tend to do when I get mad at my kids is say something. I get angry and say something. I do the opposite. Quick to get angry. I'm going to tell you why I'm mad, and maybe I'll give you a chance to speak your piece, but most likely I won't. Go to your room, right? That's tends to be my formula. But man, when I get it right, when I take the moment to go, okay, I'm going to be quick to listen. Because how many know as parents, our goal isn't just behavior modification. We don't just want them doing the right things. We want their heart. And if we'll be quick to listen, usually we will discover that there's something going on a little bit deeper than just the bad behavior. And if we'll take a moment to assume that we don't know everything about the situation, let's ask a couple of questions. We'll get to their heart. We'll figure out that maybe there's something deeper going on. Not all the time. We don't always get there, but often we do. And man, when we get to the heart, that's parenting. That we can parent the heart, not just their behavior. Be quick to listen. Next time you get upset with your kids, maybe take a moment. What's going on, son? Hey, tell me why you responded in that way, and see if you don't learn a little something different. Slow to speak. And I know in my marriage, I have many testimonies of getting that one wrong. Sometimes I'll walk into the house or I'll show up and I'll know immediately that I have done something that I shouldn't have done, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. Are there any other, don't raise your hand on that one. We know, we get it, right? And so if you've ever been in premarital counseling with me, I teach the 10-second rule. Just take 10 seconds before you say what you want to say. I'll usually know what I want to say. And it usually is something like this. Obviously, I did something wrong. You're mad again. What's going on? How many of you know that conversation doesn't go in a real positive direction? And so I take the 10 seconds, and here's my question in my mind is, how do I want this conversation to go? And if I will give myself 10 seconds, pray, how do I want this conversation to go? Usually, I'll come in with something like this. Hey, babe, I can tell something's bothering you. Do you want to talk about it? How many of you know those are two very different conversations? That 10 seconds saved me about a day and a half of fighting when I take it, when I'm slow to speak. And it's not just about that, but it's about often our initial reaction, especially if you're gifted like I am with words and sarcasm, it's going to cut. It's not going to be what you want to say. It's not going to take you where you want to go. So we're going to be slow to speak. We're going to be quick to listen. And if we'll do that, usually we'll be a little bit slower to get angry. And so I want to encourage those of you today that maybe are dealing with anger. What is that thing that has got you angry? And again, it might be righteous anger. Maybe you're angry about our country, maybe the direction, the moral decay of our country. That's righteous anger. Maybe you're angry about an issue of injustice in our country. And man, that's righteous anger, but righteous anger doesn't justify unrighteous responses. The way that we speak to others, the way that we post to social media. Let's be quick to listen. Just assume that you don't know all there is to know about the issue. Slow to speak, slow to post, and it'll help us to become slow to get angry. You know, Peter was mad, but he was mad at the wrong thing. Jesus was angry too. For Peter, the anger was this person, this servant of the high priest, Judas, the system, right? But Jesus understood that the battle that we fight is not flesh and blood, that we do have an enemy, but it's not the person that's made you mad. It's not the wife or the kid. It's that there's a battle going on. If we'll learn to channel that anger in the right way, like Jesus did, he was getting ready to go deal with it. He was getting ready to go deal with sin once and for all on the cross. So I think he would tell us, hey, no more reacting out of anger.
All right. Well, again, I try to make it very clear and to the point. Any other questions, comments about anger? All right. Yeah.
Talks about self-control.
Mm.
You touched on that. Yeah, we want to
Yeah.
have that self-control to assess and then not take.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Fruit of the Spirit being in direct relation to, okay, how do we respond in anger? Yeah.
Settle matters, fix that, doesn't time for that anger to grow into
Yeah.
other issues.
Right. No, you're right. Yes. And yeah, do not let the sun go down on your anger. Mm. All right. Well, let me close in prayer and then we will be dismissed. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks, Lord, for this day. We give you thanks for your word, your wisdom. God, we pray that when we feel anger, that we do not sin, that we are slow to speak, quick to listen. God, that in our anger we do not dishonor you, that we do not demean others, that we still honor others, that we are honest with our anger, but we also love people regardless of the anger. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.